Hello guys, welcome to Chem Assassin. Today we have a very important guest with us, Miss Kritika Jha. She has got a PhD position in 9 top US universities. Out of the 11 universities she applied for. So Kritika, I would like to request you to give you a brief introduction to our viewers.
Uh, Thank you so much, Kanishk. So I have done my bachelor's in chemistry from Delhi University, Kirodimal College, and I pursued my master's in chemistry from Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur.
Okay, Kritika. So what you have achieved is remarkable. First of all, congratulations for that. And now I would like to ask you first question. When a person or a student gets into two or three of such reputed universities, it feels like an out of the world achievement. And you got into 9 of them. So how does it feel?
Yeah, I can say this feeling is inexplicable because as seen from the third semester of our IIT Kanpur, it was such a traumatizing period seeing the application procedure and such uncertainty of selection, seeing your profile. So it's really amazing that we got through this period. All my fellow mates, it was so tedious for all of them. But I can say that you can ease out this pressure and this entire application procedure if you go on time, if you do everything on time. That will be for the aspirants who are coming next. So if you know, you can ask from your seniors or take some guidance from anyone. And if you know when to prepare for GRE, when to start writing your SOP actually, the TOEFL, and when to start sending for the recommendations, so that will be really helpful and that will just ease out the process.
Okay. So getting into 9 such universities definitely requires a strong profile. How did you build such a strong profile first? And secondly, when should one start working for it?
Yeah, I can say that because this application procedure, as you can know, that it's actually a reflection of your 5 years of experience that you have been doing. And university students, especially because I was also from Delhi University, they are unaware of the opportunities that we might get as a chemical in this field of chemical research. I remember during my time from Homi Bhabha, there was this program, and only those students who got selections in that program were doing the research. Other than that, they didn't think about any other opportunities that they might get. So students need to be aware that they can separately apply to the professors as well in different institutions, even if they don't get in some of such programs like IAS, PSRP, and Homi Bhabha, etc. So, and I must say that in university students, state universities, the prime goal is to get good grades. So they are not that much inclined towards the research, but I should say that they should be aware about these chemical research, pursuing chemical research skills. And even if they're ambiguous about what they might do in future, maybe to go for GATE, ONGC, etc. But still, different exposure to such different labs will always come in handy because you can include those things in your CV. So it's never a waste. So you should go for it, and in the early phase of life, just start with your research experiences. And I'll say for my profile, I was guided by my brother, and he always asked me to pursue chemical research in every year, even for winter internships and for summers. So in my profile, I have this research experiences of 6 projects. The master project also include ISC Bangalore. Then this is CBS Mumbai. Then there is DRDO. Then there is one industrial internship and the innovation project. So these 6 projects I have presented. Then based on the academic experiences, I have like if you how fundamentally clear are your concepts. So for that, I have presented these ranks apart from the CPI and the GRE subjective. These ranks I used to give some different exams during my jam time, and I have included those along with the net GRF also, because then that can portray that you have such some fundamentally concepts are clear for chemistry. And for that presentations, I have a separate section. You can include that in various honors and award sections are also there in the application procedure. But I'll say highlighted it at every place if these are like really important for you. So I've just highlighted all the presentations, the prizes that I've got in all my presentations, etc. So this actually builds a profile, and you need to understand that this PhD application it encompasses almost everything: your academic experiences, your research experiences, and your collaborations, your the participations in conferences, your publications, in fact also your participations in the, like those Sahyog NGOs, how you are teaching, those also come into count. Your eco clubs participations, or you can say that leadership skills, your team spirits, your interpersonal relationships with your colleagues, and how you are building up that networking. So everything comes in handy when you are applying for this application question.
Okay. So my next question is SOP, statement of purpose. It plays a major role in any application, and this has been a major concern among students for years. So how should you actually write an SOP?
Yeah, this is like the most crucial ingredient of your application procedure, I must say. But and I'll try to detail it so that it can help maximum students. Uh, First of all, I should say that people don't understand that this how they could make an impact on the minds of the admission committee. That is really important. They generally extend to write a generic SOP which has been guided or which has been going along, but you need to understand that you need to steer out from listing, just jotting down all the points that you have like come across in your entire journey. Rather, you need to make actually an impression that they could retain after like reading, so going through so many applications, right? Because they have like thousands of applications with them, and how can you understand, like they just have a glimpse of it. And
Yeah.
in fact, like UCLA at one time had 1 lakh applications, so you can imagine like how, like how can they do it, how can just understand or be alert in every application. Okay, the first thing I'll say is the first paragraph that the students tend to write is first a quote that is like a personal choice, but then they start writing about the chemistry, like how they got enthralled with the chemistry, seeing some experiments in their institutions, and because of which the chemist inside them awoke, and because of, so they write the first point about the subjects, then they start with the bachelor's, or some people even include the 12th results if they have good results, and then the bachelor's thing, the bachelor's experience, then coming across to the master's, and then like writing all the research experiences. At the end, the professors, and that's it, end. But I believe that if you are starting, first of all, when you are starting the starting paragraph, so why don't you include some motivation? If you are a researcher, you might be working for something, a cause that might bring a change in the society. So why don't you bring up that? Because that will put an impact on the mind of the reader or the admission committee that, okay, this person is working for this. I'm not saying that if you are working for say renewable, your long-term extrapolated this good thing is say renewable sources of energy or the energy. Like I'm also working on water oxidation. I'm not preparing some renewable sources of energy in my lab, but still, for a longer, larger goal, you might be working on something. If you suppose like you're working for biochemistry, then you can write about the how you can getting the cues from the nature to bring about a change, right? So you need to put a motivation and impact, a broader impact of the project that may have on the field or the scientific discipline. Okay, because I had seen some. Why I'm stressing on this point is I've seen some SOPs. The student starts with the first paragraph of why he likes science. Because of in when he was a student, he used to see on the sky why the sky is so blue. The second point, second paragraph being why maths, because he saw some boxes in his notebooks, so he got fascinated, and that's why he became a theoretical chemist. So I don't know how will that impact actually the admission committee. So I guess this is a better way, mature, but still everything is a personal choice. Okay, and you can quote down things, but try to make things more decent and creative. Don't include too much of jargon in that, so that will just look more decent. Okay, so the next thing I can say is about the research perspective. I guess again from some of my stories, I'll say that I was very conscious about my application, about my profile, I can say. So what I used to do is when I was a junior, so I used to take my hard copy of my CV, and I used to roam around in front of the some of the professors and used to show them for the recommendation. So I used to see that they analyzed just the first page of it, and just that's it. Just they had the glimpse of it, and that is actually natural. What a admission committee might do. You need to write the best part of your credentials in the first page, like in the starting portions.
Yeah.
So if a student is actually writing the bachelor's part, maybe he has not done such good things. He may have done some good things in the master's. So it's not necessary that you start with the initial portion, only initial journey of your life. You can just write the first paragraph, say, of motivation for whatever cause you're working, and you can end it by, if given a chance, I'll be thrilled to explore the highest echelon of research at so university. Then you can write in the second paragraph about first your prime interest lies in this research field, and about the research experience that actually motivated you the most to work for that field. Okay, and what the level of perspective and the level of optimization that research gave you. Okay, so how it actually helped you, how you were able to contribute. This question was asked by many professors in many of my interviews also. So I'm saying you should write about this in SOP. Then you can come to your other priority wise to other research experiences which were meant important for you. And actually, what happens is the university has some four to five questions that are written in their SOP section that they give in the advices how you should go along with your SOP. You can read that and just go along with your research experiences, explaining all those stuff. If you can incorporate any of these things, that will be really helpful. And I must say that, like, apart from the research experiences that you have innovatively tried to write, like I used to write this line of like the feeling of getting pure crystals, which has not been reported yet, is second to none. So, like some of those things. But yeah, after writing these research experiences, I should say you can also jot down your ranks if you have some good ranks, because I was also feeling that I had some good ranks in the other exams that I used to give. So I wrote like, apart from the coursework, I also gave one year of my preparation time for this, say, IIT JAM, which admits like less than 3% of the students to top IITs and stuff. So you can jot down all the other ranks as well in the same way. And you can also include, like, say, I appeared in NetGRF if you have, or in GATE exams. So this NetGRF, which monetarily assist the graduate program in India, and you can smartly introduce that. But I declined the offer because I wanted to actually pursue my graduate career in an esteemed university like this, and then tell about why this university, about the, like, apart from the research benefits, I was also inclined towards, I wanted to pursue that academic culture and all the stuff that you like about the university, and then about the professors. So this will make a good story, I hope. And don't leave it after the research thrust that you're writing about the professor, that you're intrigued by this things. After that, don't just leave it there. I guess you should conclude your SOP with something, a good line about the university, or anything that you feel comfortable or which you think is innovative enough. Like, say, overall, I was intrigued by the thoroughness of the research being undertaken at this university, taking into aspects ranging from, say, synthesis to spectroscopy to theoretical analysis to deliver like a compelling story. And I also want to inculcate such comprehensiveness in my own work ethics going forward with my graduate research. So you can just add on, like,
Yeah.
and sum up, yeah. So this will just sum up the things.
Okay, Kritika, you explained it really well, step by step. One another major concern of students is shortlisting universities. They suffer a lot in shortlisting universities, and yet they sometimes don't get their desired ones. So, what is the correct approach for that?
Yeah, I must say that getting 9 out of 11 colleges actually depended a lot on the selection of those colleges. I used to discuss this with my brother and some of my seniors. So, what I analyzed is there are some elite colleges, which I must say, I shouldn't name them, but still the UCs, the Stanford, Princeton, you can imagine, like, they have a different criteria, and they're like very low acceptance rate, and they're flooded with applications everywhere.
Yeah.
So I must say, considering those elite colleges, if you know that you have a criteria of the ambitious, then the moderate, and the safe ones. So if you're applying to them as your ambitious one, or even some as the moderate ones, still you need to be aware about if there is a chances of selections. So for that, I guess you should mail the professors beforehand before applying, and like give them time of 5 to 6 days for responding to your mail. If you get that response, you can definitely apply. Like if you get a positive response from them, you should definitely apply. But if you don't get that, then you should be in dilemma of applying or not applying. Okay, so what I used to do was I used from the SOP we have to submit at least like 3 to 4 professors in which I'm interested in. So I've already written down, jotted down all the research work. So I used to just copy paste that in my mail, the format where I used to write about myself and then that I'm thinking to apply to this particular university, and I just wanted to know if I'll be a good fit for your lab or not. So you need to do this before the application procedure, because then only the professor can just encourage you to apply to that admission committee. But some students used to do just mail that after submitting the applications. But I don't think that like there is any sense in doing that, because now what the professor will write or respond to you, right? So you should do that beforehand. Secondly, I used to like mail this to like say 33 professors, because I applied for 11 universities. In fact, more than that, because I also mailed some of the professors in such elite universities. And then second thing I would say for the shortlisting is networking. As I said, if you are working in the research labs, if you are working in more different research labs, you will get more exposure, and based on that, the networking should also increase. Uh, Maybe with the professors, maybe from the mentors that you have, your seniors, or someone from your lab. So such networking actually helps while applying in this period. In fact, it can also help you for getting in such elite colleges. Okay, so this networking is really important. Then for shortlisting, you can also see for your profile. There are some like sites where you can just see the profiles of the students that has been selected in that particular college. So you can just compare it if it aligns perfectly with your profile or not. Maybe it will not, but still you can consider how what approach this university takes for selecting the students. And you can also let your profile be checked by various other people, your seniors. And there are sites like MyMgrad and other sites that I can tell later, where you can just check for the profiles. And also I can say like there are some particular universities, I guess what I have analyzed, you should apply to such universities. They are good, like USC, University of Pittsburgh, Texas A&M. These are some of the good universities, but what I have analyzed is in my like batchmates, they have almost selected everyone. And USC, say for instance, USC is such a nice university. It has no application fee and they have exempted GRE. This year, GRE has been exempted from most of the universities. And see, and they had selected a lot of students. Like TAMU has selected so many students. For in safe colleges, you can say Arizona State University takes students in bulk. So you can apply to such colleges, considering that you might get selections, because there is such uncertainty. And you some, as you mentioned, some doesn't get selection in even one of the colleges. But like these are some of the safe colleges. If you get inside that, even though it's not the desired one, but still you can take a transfer next year. Just get there and take a transfer next year. So that is also a different option. Other thing for the shortlisting, I must say there is a myth. It is like a false perception that if 2 to 3 students from the same university are applying for the same field, then they might not get the selections. But I have seen many of my seniors. In fact, my brother also says like his batchmates got selections, like 3 of them applied to the same university and they got selected in the same university, same lab. So this is a false perception. If you like someone's work, you really like someone's work, just apply to that university. Don't bother with such things. Okay. So yeah, this is for shortlisting. Some more things I'll tell later.
Okay, Kritika. Since you mentioned earlier that you used to go with a CV in your hand for the recommendation, so how do you think is the best way to send a good recommendation letter in the universities?
As I mentioned, this going away with the CV, that was actually in my junior years. when I was not aware much of how to approach the professors and stuff. But yeah, I can say for this recommendation point, first of all, it's really important if you get a draft, because this recommendation actually matters a lot, because it actually validates what your SOP writes or what you have written about in your CV, etc. So it is validated by a recommendation. So if you write a draft for the professor, then it will be really helpful. But some students say that my professor haven't asked me for a draft, so how can I send it? I guess like you can write in the mail itself when you are asking for this recommendation that I intend to help you with a draft so that nothing is left out. And that is really genuine, because the professor doesn't have so much of time to like jot down each and every point and remember what you might have done in the lab. And it's not like if a professor has agreed to give you a recommendation, then probably he is actually thinking that you get that in that particular university, right? So I don't think he'll not look at the draft, because they don't have that much time. They'll actually take help from it. And so just try to give that draft, and in the draft actually try to validate what you have written in the SOP. For example, during my innovation project, my I was a junior most member in that, but my professor used to give me that work of like the leadership, to engaging everyone in that presentations, giving them their work, etc. And I used to I validated that in my recommendation about the leadership and the team spirit, etc. So that is actually a really good thing if you just validate things. Then the second I guess is the highest priority that you give. Uh, it should be given to the research professors first, under whom you have done some research work and lab work, or then to the collaborations. If you had some collaborations with that lab, then that will matter, because actually the PhD is for the research work mainly. So I guess it will be better if you give the highest priority to these people, then to the coursework, and then to the non-coursework professors, right? And then the third thing that I'll say is for the seniority. I have heard a lot of things like my batchmates, my fellow mates also got this idea that if I'll get a recommendation from the head of the department or the professors, then that can just make a better impact. But what if the professor doesn't write good for you? If he writes that generic two paragraphs saying that he's a nice student, he has done this in my course and stuff, then what? So that professor or the head of department won't matter. And that has happened with my fellow mates who had taken it from the head of the department, etc. And they didn't get so many selections, right? I took it from like almost all the assistant professors, but based on the draft and everything, they wrote really good things for me. So you need to take it from those people who actually matters and who will give their time to write your recommendation, considering it's a really important part of your life, right? And then there's also this thing that if you are taking this, if two or three students are taking it from the same professor for the same university, then that might hamper your selections, because then he has to rank you in that order, because and he has to also tell you that you are among the 1%, 5% and stuff. So if you are ranked below, then obviously that will impede your selection. So these are some of the very important points for the recommendation from my side.
All right. Now, this is for the students who are not financially that stable. Can you throw some light on the expenses, all the expenses throughout the application process in US universities?
Guess I don't want to discourage the students with the expenses, but still, it should be made real that yeah, if you're applying to say in general 6 to 7 universities, then you have to spend approximately like 1 lakh rupees. And so, but I guess like if even if you are financially unstable, because I remember in my IT Kanpur there were so many students. They are so like such amazing profile, but still because of the financial issues, they are not able to apply. I guess if you are taking some, say, educational loans or taking some help from your seniors or your batchmates on this thing, how much the you need to see that how much the average cost is of that college, like how much stipend it is providing you, so that it like because many students are able to save a lot of money. Taking the example of my brother, he was he spends recklessly, but still he was able to save like approximately $500 every month. In fact, one of my very close senior, she saved approximately 22 lakh in that entire course of 5 years. So that means a lot. The, I don't know if you'll be able to do that in India compared whatever what you get in India. So it's actually a good investment in need, and plus you get such better research infrastructure and everything, the education that you get. You can come back to India, but yeah, that will just it's a very good investment in the initial phase of your life. You need to get that. And as you know that this year, in fact, the GRE has been exempted from so many universities, so that will save the cost. Along with that, as I mentioned, like USC, they have no application fee. Scripps University doesn't have application fee. So there are various universities that don't have application fee. And even not for this year, some other universities like the Pittsburgh University, etc., they exempt you from GRE for all the other years. So you don't there are some universities for which you don't need to give GRE, and for that makes it most important that you actually spend a lot of time for TOEFL. The TOEFL speaking score is really important, trust me. And in fact, the TOEFL for each of the sections, I must say it should be above 20 or 22 at least for a normal student. I'm saying, but you need to focus on your speaking section, and not only for US but for other countries also. TOEFL will be really important. So just try to focus more on that. Don't just give all your time on just GRE. TOEFL might take 10 to 15 days for a normal student, but still you need to give that for the speaking skills, because you need to be a TA during your PhD time. So speaking is really important. And coming back to this entire procedure, I guess it's expensive. And so, concluding, I'd like to say that you can apply this year. It will be really cost effective this year, seeing that a GRE has been exempted from so many places. So, just apply.
Okay, all right, Kritika. Before concluding, do you want to say something to the aspiring students?
Just say that maybe this journey is really tedious, as I mentioned, and you might be feeling so many things at the same time. But trust me, at the end, you'll feel that it's so inspiring. Everything that you'll be able to learn, the more the better. So you will have a different sort of a person after this application process. And I would say for those students, as I mentioned earlier, that you should start your research work, getting such experiences in your early phase of life, right? This is really important, trust me. Also, I should say, like, you need to have such guidance is really important. Have some seniors around you who can actually tell you about all the opportunities. And also for the aspirants who are applying this year, through the entire application procedure, you need to have some guidance on when to apply, where to apply, how GRE is important. And also when you are applying for say GRE subjective, it will be really beneficial if you give that exam even in your bachelor's or your master's first year, because then it becomes a burden for you if you are giving all the GREs in the second year, because you have to write SOP, you have to write drafts for RECO, you have to give those GRE, TOEFL, everything. And it is valid for 5 years. So you can give it in your bachelor's, and it's a really easy exam, GRE subjective. So you can easily maintain everything and just get a very good percentile in that exam. So this is for the aspirants, the guidance. And lastly, I'd say like there is no substitute for hard work, but if you do it very smartly, so that will make a greater impact. That's it.
All right, Kritika, thank you very much for joining us today. I am sure this video will help many aspirants and they will get motivated after watching this video, and they will get to know the real insights of the whole application process. And yes, as you said, there is no substitute for hard work. And if you do it smartly, then you will definitely end up like Kritika, getting selected into 9 or maybe more universities. So guys, please share this video with your friends and don't forget to subscribe the channel. Meet you in the next video.